Awesome, thank you.
When it's treatable, Maria?
Yeah, my doctor's care.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think that's.
Oh, okay.
So annoying.
You gotta turn on our, it'll be on, we're throwing up as our black dogs. If you just hit minimize top right, you lose.
Yeah, the video connects on lips. Yeah. Yeah, the video connects on lips.
Yeah, maybe.
You fall like on the bottom right, on the right side.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That would mute us too.
Yes.
Right. That would mute us too.
Oh, I guess you have to mute us on the bottom left. There's like a little microphone
I
icon.
can't see, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I guess here. Yeah.
Hi there.
I think we want that unmuted so they can hear us, but we want the speaker here to not. Yeah, you can.
Is there anything for it?
I mean, I think that's muted, but they can hear us. Or we want to make that close.
Cause you also want to hear other people if they're speaking.
Yeah. You make that close. Oh, that's your. No idea. If we turn it off, where does the audio come from? I know. Oh, okay.
When he was working on.
How you heard us?
I mean, I have also.
Can you hear us on the call?
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
all right.
Carla, we can hear you too. All right, sorry about that, the tech difficulties, but I think we got it sorted out. Let's give it another minute, let some other folks join. We have a lot of people who are gonna be joining virtually. I think there's some sort of sickness going around, so lots of illnesses.
Okay, you're welcome. You're signing.
Do you want us to sign in with them, the person?
Yeah, yes, that one. Yeah. Everybody? Yes,
We're planning.
okay, so yeah, everybody.
Yeah, pretty fine.
Yeah, city planning.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Nothing to play. Yes. Yeah.
He emerged from
Oh.
environments license.
Yeah,
Really
it's-
nice.
Oh, okay.
Navigate with the Clipper.
Oh.
It's solid, yeah.
They know about.
Yeah, I mean, it holds us up.
All right, why don't we get started? Thanks for joining, everyone. Really appreciate it. This is gonna be a joint meeting of the land use and the parks committees because we have an exciting parks update. So that's the first thing on our agenda. Let me tee it up and then I can share either presentation, right, share my screen. You can walk us through it, but basically this is hey, welcome. This is a ULURP application for the walk to a park site selection acquisition application. And basically what this is, we've talked about this a little bit in this committee, but we're gonna identify and acquire some privately owned properties throughout our district to expand park access and close our park gaps. So really excited to hear about the process and the site selection and all these important details. So before we get into it, I just want to let people know the timeline for this application. So obviously, this is a joint land use and parks committee meeting, and we're going to hear the presentation for the first time. Then in the full board meeting on Thursday, March 5th, we're going to hear this presentation again for the full board. And in both today's meeting and that full board meeting, we'll collect questions from the Parks Department, comments, all that good stuff. And then they're going to come back to our committee meeting on Wednesday, March 18th. That'll be another joint meeting between us and Parks. And they'll have answers and follow-up responses to all the questions that we raised. And then the full board meeting on April 2nd is going to be when we vote on the whole ULURP process. So with that being said, why don't I pull up the presentation and we can get started with parks. Give me 1 second and then I'll pass it over to Grace. Ruby, and I'll tell you to start. Okay, good marriage.
That was your main goal?
For one, I was just considered as a I really like the conference.
Damn. All right, let's do it.
Good evening. My name is Colin Helderson. I'm the Chief of Parklands and Real Estate, and I'm joined by Jules Dowling. Both part of the planning unit at the Department of Parks and Recreation, part of the Environment and Planning Division. And we're here to talk to you all about our application. So thank you to all the board members for attending. And we appreciate being here, and we're very much looking forward to presenting this to you. We were last here at the community board, the Land Use and Housing Committee. We were here in September and then in December, and we kind of walked through the application, the idea of it. And there were various questions and comments that were raised at that time. But what has happened is that our application was filed in late January, and the ULURP application was certified by the City Planning Commission on February 2nd. And now we're here in the community board review period, which goes into April. So we're just going to walk through the application and discuss changes we've made and point out some things since our last couple of times here at the board. And I know there's another new committee here too that were not at those other prior times. So the second slide, this is the basics, but for this application, it's both New York City Parks and DCAS who are the co-applicants for this ULURP application. When a city agency is applying for property, DCAS also is a co-applicant. They carry out critical points in the acquisition process, so they're a co-applicant on the ULURP application. And I think there's a couple of people on the phone from DCAS listening as well. But we are seeking approval, like you said, for the acquisition and site selection of certain sites to enable opportunities for additional parks in the district. And it's all to the cause of creating accessible parks to community members This is a citywide map, and the pink areas are areas where residents live in, not in a walking distance of the park. And to the next slide, as we are all aware, parks are critical infrastructure for urban areas. They're beyond places for rest and recreation. They also provide necessary space for social connections, respite for residents, environmental benefits, and also of course, the physical and mental health benefits that the spaces provide. These factors inform parks pursuing a new strategy to realize new parks in underserved communities such as Queens Community District 2. Right now across the city, 84.2% of New Yorkers are within a walking distance to a park. It sounds like a healthy number, but that still leaves 1.4 million New Yorkers not within the walking distance. So we have examined districts across the city and assessed the walk to a park gap areas, along with poverty and population density data to select underserved communities, such as Queens Community District 2, for a neighborhood scale approach to obtaining acquisition approval. This ULURP effort aims to assist in the city's acquisition approval process, as one of the most significant challenges we face is the length of the ULURP process, which is around 2 to 3 years from the onset of identifying potential properties for park development to the actual closing of the contract of acquiring the property from the seller. The project aims to provide the required acquisition land use approval for a number of pre-identified sites of suitable for parkland development, and enable us to enter directly into negotiations with the ULURP approval in place. We believe this approach will enable opportunities for new parks seeking property owners who might be interested in selling their property. And the next slide, the application focuses on Community District 2, both to create parks and gap areas and also boost the low open space ratio across the district. So there are areas in your district that are not in gap areas, but there's just the population density is so strong that there's just not enough parkland to serve the residents. The district encompasses Sunnyside, Woodside, and Long Island City, represented by Councilmember Julie Wong, with a portion in Woodside that is within Councilmember Krishnan's council district. Slide 5, just a snapshot for the district. You can see here the density of the population, 44,000 people per square mile. That's quite high when you look across all districts in the city. 25% of and also the population increase that you guys are all fully aware of is a huge factor here. A very low open space ratio, 0.38, and over 26,000 residents in gap areas. So those all were factors that led us to choose this district. I'm just going to speak about the methodology, the next slide, for selecting primary sites. This criteria has not changed from when we were here before. So just to recap, the primary sites are vacant sites, minimum of 5,000 square feet. The 5,000 square feet, if it's the same owner, it could be 2 adjoining tax lots that add up to 5,000 square feet, and no active Department of Building permits. Next slide, the methodology for selecting secondary sites. So these are built sites, but our criteria is listed here, and we found these to be underbuilt sites as per the zoning. And a couple of nuances here that have been altered is that the sites don't necessarily have to be in a gap site, but they must serve a gap site. So if you can imagine the capture area from doing the walk GIS analysis, it does grab a part of the district that they are not served by a park within walking distance. And the other criteria was also that any buildings that were constructed or improved had to be prior to 2011. So no recent investment, making them unlikely to be candidate sites. And this was a nuance since we were here last that were changed in the application. And then the next slide is just to speak about just the possible opportunities that these sites might afford. We have no prescriptive plans for any of these sites. We have no design or programming set, but depending on the size of the property, of course, you can achieve, different programmatic needs. So this is just examples of sites in the cities, different sizes, and what kind of features they could lend themselves to, but we have no prescriptive designs. If we acquire any of these sites, they would go through the typical parks public input in the design and programming of a site, just like when your playground in your district might be reconstructed. There's a design input process that's done along with that. This would be no different. And also, I will just say that wrapped into a capital project, we would also of course, make sure that the park site meets all the ADA requirements, and that we're also addressing any remediation of any hazmat concerns on the site. So that would all be done as part of a capital project after a successful acquisition. I'm gonna turn it over now to Jules to walk through sites, updates since we were here last in December, just to provide a snapshot of that.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. So I'm just gonna reiterate the secondary criterion change that Colleen just mentioned. So like she was saying, when we were, coming up with the different sites for the last 2 times we saw you all, the criteria was that the secondary sites needed to be like in those pink gap areas. And then since then, we've been working with, VCP, to make that criterion a little bit more flexible. So basically, like we do GIS analysis and we see, okay, for this site, how many people are living near the site? And so essentially, if a site is close enough to one of those pink gap areas on the maps, if it's close enough to those gaps that it can reduce the size of the gap and serve people that aren't already in like a walking distance to a park. Those sites are now available to us. So what was that?
Do you want to flip to the next slide? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There
Oh,
we go.
sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so because we expanded that criterion, we have added a lot of sites since the last time we came to this committee. And all the new sites are listed on this slide. And then we also have a map on the next slide, that basically this is our most up-to-date map of all of the secondary sites in the application on ZAP right now. And we've just circled all of the new sites in yellow. So that's what's shown here. So and part of the reason why we did this is because we wanted to be responsive to some of the comments that we were hearing back in December, which was that, there were some gap areas like I'm seeing on the northern east side, where we previously only had, we didn't have that many sites, so we've added to that and hopefully will increase our odds of finding a low-selling area.
Just for everyone on the call in here, I'll email this out to everyone, so you have all the maps and details.
Great. And then just moving on to the next slide, some other updates in the application. We did remove one site. It was 5002 Northern Boulevard. This was actually a site that was suggested to us by the land use committee. We did have to remove this site because it wasn't eligible, because we were made aware that BSA zoning variance was approved for that lot, so that, it didn't meet all of the criteria. And then we also, we had presented in December that we were going to be removing several sites that were in the Long Island City Industrial Business Zone. We heard some feedback that people were more optimistic about those sites and wanted to keep them in the application. So this is just a note to say that we've kept them in, and we didn't go through with removing them. And then next, this is just a map of all of our primary sites. And this is also the portion of the presentation where we start to go through all of the different sites, just site by site. So this is just starting with our primary sites map. We have our 7 primary sites. This has not changed since December. And yeah, I guess we can give people a minute to take a look at it, but you can see that there are a lot of sites in the Long Island City area, and then there's some dispersed on the other side of the community district. Did you want to go through those?
I leave it to you. We have a slide for each of the sites.
Yeah,
to
let's
give
not
the
go, yeah,
snapshot.
let's not go
Yeah.
site by site, that'll be really
Okay,
deep in detail, but again, I'm gonna email this out to everyone, so on your own time, you can go through it site by site, and if you have questions. Email me and I can collate all the questions sent to you too.
Is there any way that we can maybe just touch upon like the largest site or the top two largest?
of course.
Is that okay for you?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
let's do the largest primary and the largest secondary.
Great. That sounds perfect.
Largest primary would be site 3.
We have visuals on that.
Yeah.
Yes, primary site 3.
They're in order, so great.
Oh,
Which
thank
is
you.
why 15?
15, okay,
15.
thank you.
All right, so this site is currently an office building with parking facilities. It's in an manufacturing M14 district. And it's adjacent to numerous 1 to 3 story commercial and office buildings, and this is also in the IBZ, in an IBZ area.
Jules, I think this is a different one.
Oh,
Yeah.
am I looking at secondary?
Might be one off,
Oh, sorry about that.
sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. 420. Sorry.
I was like, this still looks like not.
Sounded like, the Rolex site.
Yeah, I think you're one off. It's the one right above it. Oh,
Okay.
Do you? I guess this one is the Rolex site.
no, primary site is not the lowest.
Sorry. No.
Well, when
Yeah, I just don't think I printed the description for that one. But. Okay. Or, I think I was reading the secondary one, sorry about that.
Okay.
So this is a vacant site, also in a manufacturing district, but this is an M16, with also R10 zoning district. And this one's also next to some office buildings. It's a larger site, and we identified the design option 3, will probably be most suitable for this one. And then this one also has a lot of sidewalk frontages, so that helps for visibility, street presence. It can accommodate different entrances. And this is also in the recently rezoned Long Island City neighborhood, which, you know, is expecting a big population increase. And this is also within a disadvantaged community area, so. That's the largest site.
And just to
primary
clarify
site.
for the group, the inclusion of these sites doesn't necessarily mean anything about the seller's willingness to sell. It's just, we identify that these sites exist. We haven't done any additional outreach or negotiating.
Exactly, and I should say that that is absolutely correct. Before your formal public meeting on our hearing on this matter, which if according to what you outlined, is the March fifth
Yep.
date, we have to send by certified mail to all of the owners. I shall say with our first 2 applications running through them, that were last year, that did trigger some outreach in response to the letters. Some people just asked basic questions. Some people said, I have other plans for my site. Some people said, I might be interested. Some I didn't hear from.
Yeah.
But we are required for every public hearing as part of the ULURP. So before the BP holds its hearing, before the City Planning Commission, they will be getting a letter, and it provides them with an opportunity to contact us with questions or to also, speak at the public meeting and share, if they have plans or concerns or questions, whatever it might be. So.
Makes sense.
Cool. What happens if more than one person's interested that's approved? Like, how do you prioritize which site you would ultimately go with, depending on, are there factors that are built into that?
Yeah, so I think our cause for this application is both addressing the gap areas, but also helping to boost the open space ratio. So across this district, you have a few things going on. You have gap areas sort of in the eastern side, but you also have Long Island City where there is, not necessarily a lot of gap sites, but in terms of Walksville Park, but there's not a lot of open space. So, should we have, people are willing, how do we prioritize? I think one of our metrics is how many people would be served by this site. Also, that sometimes that's what we look at. We do, I think, appreciate the larger the site because you can, fit more programming needs. You can put active and passive uses, whatever the community thinks is needed for that spot. And I do think that, we have some capital funds. We are hoping to baseline this effort so that every year we have capital infusion to, see through these sites. So we hope that we will be able to do more than one site. We fully recognize not all of these sites. There will be willing sellers, but we hope there will be, a handful to really make a difference across the community. We do have to listen to the board's feedback. These are your community. You understand the needs across the district. And, what your preferences might be too as well, but I know there's a few different things going on in this district. Big growing population, not enough parks, and you also have those gap areas, so, yeah. And it could be a factor too. I know one thing that, the city planning commission with our first applications, they really wanted us to focus on the vacant sites and run those down first before going to secondary sites, because our secondary sites are, active businesses and they had some questions about those sites. So they really wanted us to run down the vacant sites first. So I shall say that there's not a lot of vacant sites, and this happens in all the districts we're looking at. But we do have to run down the vacant sites. And I shall say that vacant sites, it does, mean that it probably is less costly because you don't have to deal with demolition and other things like that, so.
So they're quite holistic.
The capital fund you mentioned, are they citywide or are there any that are dedicated? Our district?
Citywide. 19 that we have identified across the city that are underserved. This is the third one we're going through. So, we're pretty early on in this, and as I said, our hope is that, we want to spend what we have and then seek funds and baseline to address the open space needs across the city.
Got it. And then a question, in the chat, is the idea to have the city acquire the site in the current owner?
Yes, although property sells, we're not ineligible if the property owner changes. The only thing that would make a site ineligible going forward is if they pull a permit and start building something. That puts us in a position where it doesn't meet the criteria. So we do have to pay attention to that. But if an owner changes, that doesn't necessarily factor into the approval by the city planning commission, at least up to now. That hasn't been a factor.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to present before we go into questions?
Oh, I actually had a,
Lieutenant Davidson.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Somebody had asked about Lieutenant Davidson, which is in your district, and I think there's actually. Just wanted to, I think you guys, of course, somebody in the board had mentioned how that factors into things. That is a park in construction. And it will address a gap site. We actually didn't find any sites in that area, but that site, which I think is due to be completed in spring, will capture a part of the district's gap loss from that standpoint. We have a map.
Yeah, it should be on page 54.
And you guys are familiar with that site,
Or-
but just to.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's past the appendix. There it is, yeah.
Yeah.
So, this map here just shows, we've been talking about this like walk the parks kind of service area. So this map just shows, what gap will be filled once, Lieutenant Davidson Park is open to the public. What street is that on again? I think it's 39th and there. Yeah, 39.
Is this the park that's across from Betts or no? It is a bit.
Yeah. It used to be there, so.
Yeah.
We purchased it from another entity, but it had been a playground at one time, it's closed up, and then we purchased it a few years ago. Had the funds to develop it, and it's, I think, supposed to finish in spring, so that's a great new park site for the. And this is just a map that shows, like, from our way that we look at the data and the walk analysis, that it will cover some of the pink in the district, which is great. We didn't find another site anyways, but this one sort of hits a sweet spot. So that'll be great for this area of your district.
Awesome. Anything else before we go to questions?
Oh, yeah, is that in here?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the next map, it should be one slide over.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to give like an alternative viewing of, the like open space ratio. So that's the number of acres of open space per 1,000 residents. And then this is by neighborhood tabulation area, which like generally maps onto the different neighborhoods within the district. So you can see here that, you know, certain neighborhoods are better served by open space when you look at the metric that way. So yeah, a lot more acres of park per resident in Long Island City versus Sunnyside.
But still pretty low, 0.9
Yeah.
is pretty low, the citywide median for community district level is 1.3. So it's below that, and then certainly you can see the 0.25, and the middle is at 0.1 is quite low, so. But this is just a little bit more, you know, breaking up the district a little bit more. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Never tabulation area, but it's a little bit, smaller geographic area than, community districts lines. Yeah.
All right, I have a couple of questions, and then we can go to the committee members. First, for this specific ULURP approval, would it be just for the sites that you've identified?
Yeah.
Or is it a blanket approval for any future sites as well?
No, we worked with city planning really closely, and we felt that, we had to shape this application selecting specific sites. So that this application will only approve specific sites, and we also have to hold to the criteria.
Got it.
So we have to keep watch of, you know, if any of the situation for given site changes, it would make it potentially ineligible.
Got it.
Yeah.
If a property owner doesn't want to sell, is the approach just going on to the next, or are there other alternative strategies? I assume you're not gonna do eminent domain here.
That's not our intention. We are looking for willing sellers. We had a lot of dialogue with the first two applications before the city planning commission on that, and very much on the record that we're looking for willing sellers. That's our intention.
Got it. Do you know if any of these sites require remediation? Or is that gonna be next?
I'm certain some of these sites require remediation. Some of them are gas stations and the manufacturing sites. That's sort of part and parcel of those sites. So, and I shall say, before we acquire any property, we have to do due diligence to determine that we are aware of the conditions of the site. So we have to do a phase 1 environmental site assessment of the property to understand recognize environmental conditions. So we have to be informed of what those might be before acquiring a site. If a site was like, so, you know, a super fun site, it might put a pause, and we might want to prioritize another site rather than that site. But I don't doubt that some of these sites will certainly require remediation, which I have to say, for Parks capital projects, we are often doing that. We acquire sites that have all kinds of history behind them, and there are protocols, and we coordinate with DEP to ensure that we're doing what we need to do as part of a capital project.
Yeah.
Clean soil or removals, whatever we have to do.
Got it. Yeah, I know usually for ULURP applications, we get an EIS in advance, but it seems like for this, we would do something closer to actual acquisition.
Well, the idea here is that actually for the acquisition, there is a type 2 that we can look to. But should we acquire and then with the capital project, that would be when that we have to really examine the environmental because we're changing a site from whatever it is now to a park site. So that will be wrapped into that.
All right, last question from me. I think I saw that there's a 10-year sunset clause here.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes, that there is a 10-year sunset clause, so after 10 years, we no longer will have the acquisition approval. We can always go through, refresh our sites, or, maybe craft, the different kind of criteria. We can always go through again, but yeah, there's a sunset clause. I think the idea is that city planning, the commission didn't want this to be forever, to have.
So 10
have
years,
this-
eventually that's come back to us. And
Yeah.
give us new sites.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's it on my end. Anyone in the room with questions?
Should we maybe do the parks here first?
Oh, yeah, that's a good call.
Oh, no, you guys can do the room first. Go ahead.
See all I have, that's a lot of hands.
Yeah, no,
All right, no questions in the room. Carlos.
But does Carlos wanna go?
Okay.
Let's go to Carlos first.
Okay. Thanks, Permeet. So two questions. The first one is, just from this point, like, or I guess actually from the point when, assuming that we as a committee kind of approve this, what's the general timeline for acquisition? Like, when do you expect to be able to be ready to purchase? Assuming that you have willing owners of the sites.
So following ULIP approval, before the city acquires property, the first thing we do after getting ULIP approval is we have to get what's called a CBX, and it basically is approval for DCAS to commence negotiations for a site. So that is the first step, before the city can reach out to an owner and make an offer. One of the first things we have to do, should this ULIP be approved, is as I mentioned, we will need to send a letter to all of the owners of vacant property and ask them, explain to them, we have this approval. Please, let us know if you're interested in selling your property. So we have to go through that first and run down the vacant sites. But should there be a willing seller, yeah, our first step is getting what's called a CBX that's issued by OMB. It's signed off by the first deputy mayor. It's very standard practice for acquisitions by any agency. And those CBX approvals are copied to the borough president. I also believe the council member. So that's the first step. And as soon as we get those, I send it to DCAS, and that allows them to reach out to the owner and make an offer and try to negotiate a sale of a property. Should there be a successful negotiation, what happens after that is the city has a purchase and sale agreement. We have a standard boilerplate that is then discussed between the city and the owner's lawyer, or whoever the representative is. That it depends on the parties. Sometimes that can go quick, sometimes it can be several months. Once the contract is executed, then it is transmitted to the law department for closing. And once there's a closing, it's assigned to the Parks Department, and then we carry forward our capital project. So it takes about a couple months to get the CBX approval, and we need to have that. And you have to have the ULIP approval to get that before the city can carry forward and reach out to an owner. So, this ULIP being certified in February, possibly by the end of the year, maybe the early part of next year, the city would be hopefully in contact with somebody who is identified as willing and interested in potentially selling their property to the city.
Okay, great. Thank you. My second question is just, so you mentioned that you guys would love to have baseline funding for this program every year. Did the mayor include that in his preliminary budget, baseline funding for this program, or is that something that is not baselined yet?
We have some funding, but it's not baseline yet. We are trying to advocate for that, because, looking at the underserved areas across the city, we won't be able to go too far without that. So we have some funding for a handful of sites, but that's not enough. We have 2 districts approved. This will be our third one, hopefully. So our hope is, you know, in order to meet the need of New Yorkers, we're going to need funding to acquire and build out. I should say that there are other efforts that the city works towards and has done over the last few years. We touched upon this, I think, in our before, when we were here before. We are always working with the Department of Education to try to open up more schoolyards. That's existing city-owned property. Not all of them are open to communities outside of school hours. And they do require additional expense funds for the custodial staff to maintain those spaces outside of school hours. So we are constantly trying to advocate and work with our partners on that. And then we also, over the years, have also partnered with NYCHA for their campuses where there's open space. And if it's on the edges and is not available to the public, is there synergy there between open space needs and those spaces to open them up to the public? So we've used these other strategies. It's just, we turn to this idea of acquiring private property because it hasn't gotten us where we want to be. It hasn't addressed all the needs. But we have used those other tools too, and still trying to work and see some of those through and advance further.
Okay, great. For me, maybe you and I can talk. It might be a good idea in my mind to maybe send a letter to Julie Wan and the mayor, kind of letting them know that this might be a priority for us, that we baseline this funding in the upcoming budget for this program.
Yeah, I'll note that as an action item. Let's definitely do that.
Especially because the mayor's old assembly district is about a little bit of.
Mhm.
I mean, he knows.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, that's it for me.
Thanks, Carlos. Appreciate it. Let's go around the table and then online.
Well, yes, thank you. I'm really excited about this. Like, we need places to be. Yeah, I guess my question is kind of knowing that this is like very early in the process and like, who knows what will happen and which sites will move forward. When should we expect to hear from you next? And I guess I'm kind of trying to think about like strategically, like what should our input be now? Like, should we think about which sites we prefer or don't prefer? Should we think about what we want to see on those parts or don't want to see? Or should we more like support this and then, you know, we'll talk to you later about which sites and like, what features?
You know, we're open ears for any part of what you want to share. If there are sites that you really think are, you know, really lend themselves better, or maybe where they're situated would do the most good for the district, that's welcomed. I guess in terms of design and programming, I think hopefully you're familiar with the design input process. So, you know, when it comes time after we acquire the site, community board is always notified, and, you know, our capital design division with our rural offices, you know, reach out to make sure that there's an input at the time. So maybe that's premature, but my gosh, I think the sites are really where their input is most welcomed. In terms of communication with the boards, I mean, this is, you know, 10 years we're going to be looking out for this. And, you know, I defer to you if you'd like to hear updates like once a year. I don't know if that's not maybe enough, like what's going on, we haven't heard anything, that kind of thing. Certainly for once we've acquired and there's a design input, but is there an earlier snapshot, like if any owners come forward?
Yeah, we would love
You know,
to
how
hear
we
that.
can decide if there's 2 or 3 and we don't have the funds to do all of them, like, I mean, that seems like something like the community board probably has some opinions about. So I sort of defer to you, you know, at what milestones or, you know, that kind of thing, you know, from our initial outreach to vacant owners, you know, maybe, you know, hearing how did that go, to hear from anybody, that kind of thing. Would be a good time, but that's something that you could, you know, maybe discuss, consider putting a resolution, what your updates you'd like to hear, you know, how frequently.
Yeah, just some thoughts on my end. What we're gonna be asked to do with this ULIP application is to either say thumbs up or thumbs down, and then add comments. So what we'd like to do in this board is usually say yes or no with conditions. And the conditions are where we can have a dialogue with you formally. We can always email you separately and have a conversation, but, yeah, so we'll probably ask the conditions. I like the idea of like quarterly updates, probably to the Parks Committee, especially for the first couple of years, and then once we get in a place where, you know, the updates are kind of boring, we can move to annual.
You know, we've been planning and I believe, usually there's typically presence from our borough office at the Parks Committee. And usually maybe they're talking, you know, addressing concerns for existing parks or operations, that kind of thing, or also like capital projects. This could be something that we could also make sure is part of updates, on the frequency. You know, acquisitions tend to be slow moving, but this is unique thing that the city has never done this approach before. And it's a little overwhelming because there's so many sites in the mix and like what's happening, what have you heard from? So I can appreciate that it requires a little more communication and updates, so you know what's going on. Because a new park in a district is a pretty unique thing, I think, these days, so.
Great job.
Okay, several questions. So some of these lots, right? Like, I guess my first question is, how can we as a board help you in terms of communicating or getting into contact with these property owners? Because there may be some knowledge in our community of like who to reach out to, and if there's a site that we all feel strongly about, maybe we can help get behind it to like help bring that entity to the table and negotiate with you. So is there like a list that you guys will end up having of like, here's all the sites, here is the owner, and here's their contact information?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, when the first two applications running last year, we got back to the city planning commission. We actually have a protocol, reaching out to the owners and, if we don't hear from them, we are obligated to reach out to the committee board to see if they have contact information.
Yeah,
if they're
we will
aware of
most likely
something.
have contact.
Yeah, but the way that we reach out to owners is through what's on public records. So like where people get their tax bills and that kind of thing. That's what we do. But there could be some other knowledge base that, maybe is helpful. There could be a property owner who maybe English is not their native language, and
exactly.
they don't understand, they maybe think it's junk mail. I don't know
Exactly.
what might go through their minds. So
Well,
I'm
also,
happy to update, and
Okay.
if we don't hear from property owners, if there's something.
please reach out to us, as long as we are like with it, if that is acceptable for us to like help, especially if it's a site that our community ends up being really interested in.
Sure.
I think that's a.
The only thing I might caution is let's not proactively start reaching out.
Oh, I know.
These guys.
But after
Yes,
the
of
deal
course.
with this.
Yes.
And, you know, our application is publicly available on ZAP and, you know, the city planning commission report will be approved. I know whether people are looking at this and really attuned to it, I can't say, but, there's very public information about which sites, you know, that this application hopefully get the approval and who will be reaching out to.
So as we know, like one OSC is also coming down, it's like in the pipeline already, and there's gonna be a lot of building that's happening, so I can already foresee that this type of acquisition is going to be in high competition with everybody else that's going to be vying for this land. So curious, like, how does a city parks budget compete with private market transactions? Like, how do we make sure? That's also like a concern that I'm foreseeing, is like, they may not be answering because it's like, they're gonna think, oh, city transaction, it's way easier for us to sell to a private entity that has way more money. So like, what is the strategy to compete with that?
Well, I would say that the city pays fair market value, has a lot of experience with acquiring properties across the city. And, we do pay fair market value. One of the whole ideas behind this application is that we have the work in place. So typically, if there's an owner interested in the property and calls me, and it does, you know, see, it would serve a need, when I tell them we have to go through dealer, it's like, sorry, I can't wait here to 2 years, but we're trying to get a leg up by doing this. The other thing I would say is that for sites that are large, we, you know, are interested in even understanding a portion of their property. So maybe somebody wants to develop their property, but maybe they want to carve out 5,000 square feet. there are people that, you know, do develop land in the city and do want to be a good neighbor, be a good, and, we do purchase property from people, we have one going in, Community District 3, who has a real interest in helping their community and selling land for a park. There are some, not everyone is like that, but there are some, some situations like that, so, we'll do the reach out and, we do pay fair market value, the city does negotiate, and, we're in the process of acquiring property, not necessarily tied to this, but we are in the process of acquiring properties across the city and have the properties that are in contract.
Sorry, 2 more questions, sorry.
Yeah.
Really quickly on that, I think at least one of the properties, like you said, is in the IBZ, so hopefully that won't see as much speculation and appreciation.
Stop, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a very unique to our neighborhood. So even though there is stuff like this happening around the city, sometimes it just feels like it's just not applicable to what's happening in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
So whatever happens in other neighborhoods doesn't always mean it's gonna happen the same way.
Go through your others rapid fire.
Yeah, 2 others. Is this also somehow in coordination with our public land, at the waterfront? Because there's also been a lot of interest in making sure that there is a park on that waterfront. I know that's part of the one OIC investments, but is that,
I mean, like the Conroe.
Or parcel D.
like the old Amazon HQ site?
There is, there's a waterfront access, maybe city planning can speak to this better, but I think there is a waterfront access plan that's been established, so with development along the waterfront, there are prescriptive requirements tied to that. This is, it's
Okay, okay,
separate,
got it.
it's sort of built into the rezoning for
Great.
that whole,
Okay.
and the existing zoning regulations.
Parks want to spend $1.
Okay, great.
Parks want to spend $1.
Yeah.
All right, last question. And I know that we've already said that it might be a little bit premature, but I'm gonna say it right now, so it doesn't get lost later. I know, that there, at least I chair Arts and Culture Committee. I know that at least in the arts and culture sector, which is very, concentrated in LIC, there is a strong need to make sure that in any future parks planning, that there is design so that it incorporates flexible space that can accommodate performance art, artisan markets, places where a permanent statue or sculpture can be on rotation, where there can be maybe a floor mural or something like that. So that's often something that's lacking in the parks design process. It's not standard to figure out where can public art be? And that's really such a true reflection of our neighbors. So I would really strongly push that forward, since we have a huge opportunity here to acquire parkland, that be a normal part of the design process with this project.
Right, Danielle.
My question goes back to funding. Hopefully the city comes through, there's plenty of funding, but if not, or even if they do, are there other avenues of getting funding, like grants from the state, or maybe in sometime in the future, the federal?
Yes, yeah, we do pursue grants. There's actually a grant round coming up in April through state DEC. There was a round last year for state parks. So we do pursue grants. They do for acquisition. Sometimes the grants are for restoration or rehab. We also, through the state electeds, they are able to secure funding through DASNY. And we did acquire a site on Staten Island, actually, through a senator, and securing funds through DASNY, Dormitory Authority. So yes, federal government, in the past, there have been programs. Some of the federal funds have sometimes get filtered through the state, then they get grant rounds. I would say times are pretty, we all know, but in the past, yes, there have been federal grants utilized from the city. There is an old grant, especially Land and Water Conservation Fund, and many park sites across the city. Mostly it was for rehab, I would say reconstruction. But there also are sites that are protected in perpetuity. So there's a big plus for those sites. But I will say that, if we use city capital to purchase the site, it would be a great synergy to get a partner to help on the construction side. One thing is, we don't want to acquire a site and then have it locked behind a fence for
Mhm.
10 years. And so when we go to purchase a site, we also want to be looking towards eyes and seeing it through. But yes, we certainly we have grants at the Parks Department right now, and we are pursuing a couple, for the upcoming April round.
So this is another area of advocacy. This
Oh,
is a very engaged community.
Yes.
So that, and we have some elections coming, so this is
Yes.
an area we could push our.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is good for this letter that Carlos and I might write as well. Cool, Laura, did you have any?
Yeah, just curious about one thing in terms of like, when you say that you reach out to sellers, like in what manner? Is it by mail? Like what are your efforts to?
by mail. So for the
Okay.
Mueller process, we're required by the rules of the city of New York to send letters by certified mail. And then, actually for the outreach letters post Mueller approval, I went ahead, it's not required, but I sent them by certified mail too. Yes. Now, as I said, sometimes I leave my email, my phone number, and sometimes owners have reached out to me, and I might hear during this process questions or things like that. So I do have some contact information for the 2 districts we've been through. But this is where, if I don't hear from owners, and especially if it's a site that the community board feels very strongly about, like, you might have other tools or ways to get in contact with said individual, or might have information about the property or what have you. And we use, as I said, public records for the addresses on file.
Do you ever get any kind of skepticism though from people who are like wondering if it's legit? Like I'm just curious.
I would say that,
Okay.
I think one property owner I know totally not familiar with ULURP and not really understanding what this is, so like. I had to explain, what we were trying to do, and, so the questions have curiosity. I
Okay.
know one owner in another Queens district was, in that case, he had shared that the property had a long-term lease. And shared that information with me, and, it was I remember a very nice gentleman, and, had a nice conversation. One property owner, not here, had other plans for their site, and they were concerned that this ULURP would disrupt that. And I had to, so somebody was very alarmed, and when I explained what we were doing, she changed course. So yes, some kinds of, oh my gosh, the city is acquiring my property, or like, what is happening? But most of it has been, it's run the gamut, I would say.
Okay, okay.
It's run the gamut.
Alright. They may think it's eminent domain or something that's being applied or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there was one property owner, and I had to say it several times that we were looking for willing sellers. And in this one case, this property owner had a very large piece of property. I said, well, look, maybe you'd be interested in selling a portion, you can still carry out. So.
Cool,
Thank
let's
you.
do Brad, Christine, and Corey.
Thanks, and thanks to the Parks Department for this work and for taking our feedback from the last meeting in December, and trying to address it. I had just some basic questions, primarily because I don't have the printout, and so I didn't have a lot of time to kind of digest some of the material that was on the screen. But one question in particular is about the map that showed. I think what it was showing is the acreage of park space per resident in different neighborhoods. And there was like a 0.91 number for Long Island City, which was higher than, if I'm not mistaken, was higher than the other parts of the district. Did I understand that correctly? That area actually has more parks per?
That number represents how much park acreage per 1,000 residents. And so yes, from that map, from our analysis, which we'd be happy to share behind the scenes and how we calculate this, we do account for spaces that are other than in New York City Parks portfolio. We do include state or federal land if it's applicable, that kind of thing.
Would the waterfront count in the
Public
numerator
water-
here?
Yeah, we
So that's-
do.
That's probably a lot of it.
Yeah, but we're happy to, but yes, the Long Island City area has a higher rate, higher OSR than the other areas in the district, which it sounds like you're thinking that's surprising to you. But we're happy to share with you the data behind it, but we just think this is interesting because districts are so big and there's some nuances across the districts, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this data is like really important in terms of how we prioritize sites. And so I just, I wanted to make sure I understand it. And what this tells me is that the eastern part of the district is actually the most park poor,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it seems to me like we should really be trying to prioritize. I also, I also acknowledge that there's a lot more residents coming to the western part of the district with one LIC. So I don't know how that's going to change things.
I
But
wonder also, if got even more granular and didn't do neighborhood if you did even something more constrained if Court Square would, at the top. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and then my other question is just about like the primary and secondary sites. I didn't catch like exactly what that meant. And then also on the secondary sites map, there were some that were circled in yellow, but it didn't say in the legend what that meant. So if you could just clarify those things.
I think the easiest thing to think about is the primary are vacant sites. And the secondary are built sites, but from our analysis, they're built under 50% of their FAR, what they could be built as. The yellow were sites added to the secondary grouping since we last were here as a
Got it.
reflection of some of the feedback. So we were trying to, it wasn't in the legend, we were just trying to highlight the new sites for the secondary sites in yellow. Those are the new sites.
Okay. So I think that like there's a lot of like just kind of break them into two categories like that, is I don't know if that's the best way just because like there's a big difference between a multi-story building that needs to be demolished and like, a building that might have like a gas station that's taking up single story that's like taking up 10% of the lot and the rest of it's just paved over. Um, I'm just saying that, that's basically a vacant lot, the gas station, but it would in this map, it would come off as a secondary site.
Yeah,
I'm just something to think about. Yeah.
There's a lot of nuances with the secondary.
Yeah,
Yes, I hear you.
Cool. Anything else, Brad?
that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Christine.
Yes, thank you for all this work and I'm encouraged to actually see some sites. I just following up on what Brad said, I just wanted to comment that I assume the statistics that you're showing us and the analysis is all on the basis of current land use and current buildings and doesn't even include the new buildings that are already under construction but not yet completed in Long Island City and nowhere includes the projected growth based on the recently, all the recent upzoning. So that seems to me a real lack in terms of looking at that district as having more open space than some of the eastern parts of the district. And the other thing,
I could speak to that just quickly. Yeah, I think you're correct. The numbers that we showed for that neighborhood tabulation area map, those were using 2020 census numbers.
yeah, sorry.
So, it's definitely already, we can try to provide some more updated numbers, and maybe think more creatively about how to or incorporate what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, just if there is some planning should include projection, right? If you're going to upzone, you also ought to project what's going to happen as a result of it. The other thing I wonder in terms of your analysis, and I've never heard this with regard to analysis of open space, but do you look differently at neighborhoods that are predominantly or entirely multifamily versus neighborhoods that have a lot of single family or 1 and 2 family houses where, kids can actually play in the backyard or ride a bike on a driveway? you know, so that where parks are essentially your only backyard versus where, you know, there's just a little bit more open space for use.
I hear you on that. We, with city planning, we do not treat those areas differently. I believe we have done a calculation of exactly what the 1 and 2 family areas in the district, and it's pretty minimal. But we do think that there's a real difference between a community neighborhood park and a backyard. And some of those, not all of the residents might not be able to use that backyard. I do understand. I wish I had a backyard. There are so many
No,
positives about that, but I hear what you're saying. Our analysis does not really take that into account. But in this district, I don't think there's too much of that. But I think we believe that a community park is a very necessary piece of infrastructure in the neighborhood, and that's what we are trying to do. But I hear your point that, you know, it does serve some utility for people who have the backyards as
Yeah.
some kind of area to be outside and, you know, toss a bit of frisbee or whatever they're doing that has benefits, of course.
no, I totally agree with you that a neighborhood park is a necessary piece of infrastructure anywhere, really, because I mean, it has social benefits as well and brings the neighborhood together, and I mean, just all kinds of benefits. So I'm not discouraging that at all. I'm just saying, I think some of these areas where people, you know, everybody lives in an apartment and there's really are super priorities, especially when you think of them as family areas. And I just hope that they can be prioritized that way.
Gotcha.
I would also add that, I think that's accounted for in our analysis in the sense that we are already looking at like population density. And so because we're using that, it kind of like, we're automatically prioritizing those higher density districts.
Thank you.
All right, Corey, close us out.
Awesome. Thanks all. I have quite a few things to cover, so I'm going to try to move through them real quick. First of all, I'm really thankful to the parks for, you know, taking this approach. I'm really in strong support of it. I just like that it's very creative and it's looking at, you know, solutions-oriented thinking, right? Like, how can we use the space we have to provide the park space that we've all been asking for, right? So just out the gate, really strong support for this. I'm going to be advocating primarily for Sunnyside, that like dark red 0.1, you know, like worst performing area of our district in terms of open space. So, you know, I was laser focused on, in particular, lawn space. I think one aspect I'd like to get folks to consider is, as good as this analysis is, it's primarily looking at parks as a binary, right? Is there a park? Is there not a park? But I come from an area where there's playgrounds, but there's no real open, you know, open land, open grass to have a picnic or, you know, play ball sports or whatever, right? So I was laser focused on where is that design option 2, the only design option that qualifies for open lawn space present. And so looking at Sunnyside, right, it shows 0.1 ratio for open space, worse in the district. No primary sites identified and only 3 secondary sites identified. That's number 1, 2, and 22, right? And number 2 and 22 are the only ones that qualify for design option 2. They're large enough to like provide actually usable open lawn space. So my ask to this committee would be that when that opportunity arises, that if, you know, if seller is willing to sell, we really lean in on open lawn space on those 2 sites, number 2 and number 22. I'd also like to suggest, just for consideration, there was some discussion earlier about, you know, those sort of partially vacant sites, like the way a gas station has a structure on it, but it's largely cement. Maybe to consider the Celtic Park co-op parking lot on 43rd Street and 50th Avenue. That is heavily used. You know, it's a co-op's parking space, but besides some solar panels, it's largely unbuilt. Technically, if you look at it, it could qualify as a primary site. It's privately owned. It's arguably vacant. It's very close to a large unserved area on this map that has no primary or secondary site indicated.
But it's a partial site, right? The full site is a full city block. But if you're willing to consider the parking lot as its own site, it's 70,000 square feet, right? So even partially subdividing it and offering a deal to Celtic Park, like, hey, will you sell us like a third of this parking lot? You could get a plot that would qualify for design option 2. You get open lawn space. That's beneficial to the residents there. It would help their property values. Like, I don't know if they would sell. I haven't approached them about this. I think it could be an interesting conversation to have. And if it started with like an offer, then maybe it would open the doors. Full disclosure, I'm a resident there, so like I'd also be interested in spearheading this conversation as someone who's not on the wait list for those parking spaces. But just in the spirit of being creative, I think that could be a window to providing a large open lawn park in a part of the district that clearly is desperately in need of open space and doesn't have any qualifying sites that would serve it. Also in the spirit of serving that particular area, and this kind of goes beyond the ULIP process, but something I'd like to kind of perk Parks' ears about, is maybe we could consider reaching out to Calvary Cemetery to create a western entrance on 48th Avenue with a ramp, or 50th Avenue, which is at grade. And maybe even talk to them about like extending the cemetery's access hours. You know, that's obviously the cemetery is not a park, but I think for the residents of South Sunnyside to have a direct gateway to something with grass and open space, it would go a long way to showing them that the city is trying to be creative about getting them, you know, easy access to open space. And, you know, constructing a gateway, I don't think would be a huge heavy lift, especially if there was some scratch in it from the city to make it worth their while. But just an idea that occurred to me kind of like staring at this map and trying to find some solutions.
All great ideas, Corey. Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing them. All right, the last question that we have in the chat from Lisa was, does the 10-year sunset have an option for renewal? Or would it be a whole new ULIP process?
Think so,
It's a New York process.
it's what,
It would be a New York process.
Yeah, we
Parks
have-
could just submit the same list of sites, but
yeah,
it would be a New York.
yeah.
Assuming everything moves as quickly as possible, all the funding's there. When can a kid play in a park? Like,
So, I mean,
When he's 25.
let's say, okay, should the ULIP be approved? Willing seller comes forward and an acquisition process, we did in 2027 to be optimistic. Our capital process is 3 years between design, procurement, and construction. That's typical. So your 2027, 8, 9, 30, we would have a new park. And if everything went according to plan.
Sooner now, I guess.
But you can imagine every park in your district, it's gone through a history, you know, maybe decades ago, things were done a little bit differently, but that's what it is. So acquisition and then 3 years for the capital design process take place. Sometimes it'll be a little faster. Sometimes if it's like a big site or complicated, it you know, take a little longer, but that's the typical that our capital division lays out. And when in the design input meeting, I think they usually go through this too. You know, if a site requires demolition, that might add a nuance to it, you know, that kind of thing.
With a remediation here anticipated, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our projects do, you know, it's not atypical. Some might require, but I think the demolition is probably a factor. Maybe if it's one of the secondary sites. Yeah.
All right, Lisa, 30 seconds, then we need to move on.
Yeah, I just want to point out, this is a good thing for community board to put in our budget for next year
Mhm.
to acquire some of these sites.
Yeah, really good
So it's
call.
out there.
You're on the call.
Mhm.
That one's for you.
He's on it.
Cool. Thanks, Lisa. And thank you both for coming. Really appreciate it. As you can tell, everyone's really excited about this.
We do have hard copies here. We'll leave it. That's
Yeah, sure.
to reflect upon,
sure.
and you have the slides as well.
Great. And we'll see you at the full board
We will
meeting
be
on the
there.
5th.
and We'll present again is the idea.
Yeah, to the whole board.
Okay.
Yeah, each do the same presentation again. That'd be great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm very on this intro, but
Yes.
as a board, will we talk about this again in terms of like site preference and things? I don't want to get like too into the weeds.
Yeah, we will have time for a discussion for the board.
Okay.
We also will have time again as a committee to talk about this. We're gonna do another joint meeting on March 18th. So we can talk about that
Okay, we can
then.
get it.
Yes.
And if any questions come up, feel free to reach out.
Perfect.
Your discussions too. If there's some pressing
Will
thing
do.
before we're here again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, that concludes the joint committee portion. Parks folks, if you want to stick around and hear about some of the other stuff we're talking about, feel free, but if not, feel free to drop as well. Carlos, you want to say anything?
Come on, Carlos, you want to say?
I'm gonna stay, but yeah, no, everyone else is free to go. I mean, we did cancel our meeting for this month, for this, but we'll probably keep our one for next month. So we can keep talking about our stuff, but yeah, up to you guys if you want to stay. I'll stick around.
Thank you. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the Bliss Theater development. We talked about it a bunch last month. I just want to have a quick follow-up conversation on some of the action items that we took. So the first couple were related to things we wanted to share with the developer. Christine, did you share with them those greeting strategies that you had mentioned? Oh, Christine might have dropped. She said she had another appointment. Carisha, you were going to share with them some co-applicant models. Not urgent, but if you still want to share with them, that's something that you might want to.
Oh, okay. I mean, that is something that they are aware of as a
Yeah.
viable way. I think the fact that they came to us with a different plan at a lower density, kind of restarted the consideration.
Yeah.
Because that then affects how much community space they're talking about.
Yep.
Cool.
Again, not urgent. If you want to share with them, that's something that we took as a follow-up. Next thing I had was Figula. We wanted to hear about why we were going for the lower density and why DCP recommended that. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. So R8A is typically more appropriate for major commercial corridors and wide streets like Queens Boulevard. So considering like Greenspan Ave is 66 feet wide and 45th Street is 60 feet wide, both are considered narrow streets from a zoning perspective. And that's typically where the department recommends less dense districts. We recommended the split zoning, I guess, to accommodate 45th Street, which is even narrower than Greenpoint Ave, and recognize that Greenpoint Ave is like a commercial street. That's fine.
Got it.
And just to clarify, the lower density that you recommended, is the same as the current density that's on Queens Boulevard?
Further on Queens Boulevard to like the east, there's R7A.
Where it's,
Like honestly here, 50th Street, the as of right building that got built on Queens Boulevard in the Triangle, that was 11 stories, that's R7A.
okay,
So that's just typically the district that is on Queens Boulevard. It's R7X in Sunnyside, and then it's R7A kind of more to the Cavalry Cemetery side.
That's good to know about the street width. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's just to like
Guideline.
provide light and air on the street.
Cool. Ellie, are you on the call? Don't think, oh, Ellie is on. Ellie,
Yes.
just summarize for this group again, what you had sent over about the council members' concerns around cultural space, the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I just I clarified over email, but the developer never formally approached our office or briefed our office on the project, and so the council member has never given any formal feedback to the developer about the project. And of course, the council member likes to hear from the community before giving any support or feedback to a developer. And so we really defer to you all at this point to engage with the developer and let us know what your feedback is. And of course, like if you want to share that with our office, I'm of course taking notes, listening, but yeah, once you all have kind of come to a place, you're welcome to share your feedback with our office as well. But we would want that first before engaging formally with the developer.
Makes sense, thanks. So I guess all of this is in service of, we had mentioned last time that we might want to consider writing a letter of support for higher density. Hearing all of this, I don't know if that's necessary, especially if it's falling within, DCP guidelines, if there wasn't really a conversation with the council member with like some sort of, I don't know, I think we'd assume there's like a backroom deal or something like that. I think we can just let the developer come to us through the ULURP process and we provide feedback on.
The one thing I'll say about that is that I am concerned about what Carisha raised earlier, which is the idea that the space here that many people in this community have indicated that they wanted, it seems like that's off the table with a smaller And I would like to understand what that actually means. Like in the event that they're just planning to put up an as-of-right building with no theater, or I think that that's something that we ought to know the full story of before we make a decision.
Yeah, I anticipate that this is gonna actually, because this was also brought up at Arts and Culture Committee, specifically like Fali Spanish, as we know, has been really invested in this process, and hearing the feedback from last month about the strong interest for the housing potential that would be built. But then there's also a very strong interest for making sure that there is an arts and culture space. But what I'm hearing from folks that have been coming to Arts and Culture Committee is that it shouldn't necessarily be at the cost of higher density. So I think there's gonna be some committee coordination and talking that we're gonna have to do when we are negotiating eventually with the developers on this project, because it's true, if they were to build as of right, they do not plan on including any type of cultural community space. Because of your regular developer reason, it's gonna cut into the already limited amount of square footage that we would build for housing. So I think we just have to continue our conversations on like the best way to kind of get the most out of this project and try to appease all the different concerns.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess my only question is, what should this committee do, if anything, in advance of it coming to us in Euler? And I don't know what letter we would write and to.
Yeah, no, I don't
advance.
think there should be, I don't think at this point, right, there's not really any action before the.
What I was gonna say is that when an application comes in for a zoning map amendment, zoning text amendment, they're getting an approval for an envelope. So there's nothing really that's gonna legally bind them to having to provide an arts and culture space. And as a community board, there's advocacy or like kind of connections between developers and organizations that you could do to make this happen. But if an arts organization is not a co-applicant, then there's not really any mechanism that ensures it. Even then, there's more complicated, like how could you ensure that a space is built? Because we aren't approving a site plan.
Right.
What's the standard zoning map amendment? We're just approving district.
Yeah,
Makes
and there
sense.
seems to be also some space for further discussion on the arts and culture side in terms of specifically what the community would want out of an arts and culture space. There's very mixed feelings about a theater versus a rehearsal space versus, space to literally make the costumes, there's a lot of different needs, so.
Yeah.
A multi-layered.
Cool. All right, Corey, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a little about, Parmeet, maybe what you were sort of implying that this committee could do, right? Like, is the kind of consideration, maybe this committee reaches out to the developer and says like, hey, look, we know you're going for a buy right. We're not going to stand, we can't, that's fine. You're well within your right to do that. But if you were interested in building taller, we would be inclined to support that, providing the ground floor beef or, an art space. That's
Corey,
like kind of the.
So just to correct a little bit what you're saying. They
Yeah.
are gonna come before us. They do want a rezoning.
Oh, they do want a reason. Okay.
Yeah. So they're gonna try to make it an R7A district versus the R6 something it is right now. They
Okay,
had
gotcha.
mentioned that at one point they were considering an R8A. But then they decided to do the R7, and we were trying to figure out why that sort of, down zone happened.
All right, I understand.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, as a non-land use member, I'm in support of however dense it needs to be to get an art space, but the art space I want is a movie theater. So sorry, Carisha. But that's my vote. Sorry.
Noted. Cool.
I will say, I don't know if this is, y'all can come to our committee because there's a lot of action there. But there are several projects that we're trying to match with spaces. One of which does include a potential theater, a movie theater. So we don't have to bank on that to just be inside of this Bliss Theater site, because there's already been a lot of momentum around performing arts and rehearsal space. And also trying to loop in that old movie theater site and see if that developer would come back, or that owner would come back to the table if there was a project.
heard, and recognizing I'm joining the conversation late, so happy to chat more offline, Carisha. Thanks for that.
Just a temperature
It's
check
fine, anyway.
on this for everybody, like, okay, let's take for granted that the application we're gonna see is gonna be in our set and family. Like, do we approve this project without a theater? Or an art space?
Interesting question for us to all think about and ponder. If I had to answer right now, I don't know what I would definitely go with, but if I had to say right now, I might be a little cautious of it. Because if we don't want to say that, as a rule, a developer can't get a rezoning in our district or in that area without an art space, why would we punish this specific developer? I know because the site used to be a theater, so we have a special connection to this particular site. But at the end of the day, that could be something we ask of everybody, not just one folk. But again, something to think about when the rezoning actually comes to us.
I do feel there will be a lot of public pushback.
Yes, that's the thing I'm worried about.
Yeah, the precedent setting that, you know, we already see what's happened to LIC, you know, is something.
Yep. Cool. That'll be a fun one when it comes to us.
I know.
All right, Bagel, I'm gonna turn it over to you for any updates that you have.
No GCP updates. Oh, I saw that you wanted me to provide them with the update on the DEP Newtown Creek.
Yeah,
For the
if there's anything new on either the CSO tunnel, the 100 Point South parcels or the DOE buildings, if you could just let us know each meeting.
So for the DP CSO tunnel, it got approved by the CBC today and starting city council review. So the city council hearing will probably be in a month, and we don't know the date yet, but I'll look it up for it.
Nice. And nothing on the other key things.
No, not yet.
So, sorry, just to clarify, there's been no selection of, the RFP for parcels E and, or what is the other parcels?
The HPD parcels?
Yeah.
No update yet.
Do we know potentially when they're gonna select? No.
HP plan is a better idea.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't get updates.
Oh, we don't have to do that?
No, honestly, we should get them to come up to us and.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the week before our meetings, if you get an update from
Yeah,
them. that
or
would
should
be-
we all
Yeah,
just
of course.
come here? Yeah. be like, just go back.
Yeah, I mean, we can run the flagpole to them. We do talk to the Queen's office occasionally. But my expectation is that they'll do outreach once they have, more substantial updates to give.
Cool. Awesome. A couple other things on my end. We had talked last time about proactive planning for the year, and one thing that led to was discussion around the need for a land use consultant for this committee to help us with these, bigger ideas and discussions. Michael, you had an interesting idea that you'd seen from other boards where they have funds for on-call consulting. And they also issue an RFP for consultants who might just want to be on retainer. Do you want to talk about what you've seen and what we might want to consider doing?
Yeah. So I found an example from a community board in Manhattan that issued an RFP for consultants to apply and sort of express interest in being a consultant for the board. And I think that's makes a lot of sense for us. There's a particular consultant who works a lot with different community boards. But I think and so there's I think a decent chance that we might hire that person, but I think we should have a competitive process where we consider options and try to get other people to express interest and see. So I was thinking we kind of put that interest out there and give people the opportunity to apply. I think we can, in addition to having a general call, probably call out some specific projects or needs that we're interested in, kind of similar to the projects we discussed briefly last time. And so that we can kind of steer applications towards those areas in particular. So one LIC oversight is one aspect of it. There was also the Northern Boulevard stuff. And there were several others we talked about. So I think an RFP that's both sort of a general call and then also includes some specific areas might be a way to get this process going.
Yeah, I love that idea. Why don't me, you, and Christine, since she also has some ideas here, work together on how to draft that RFP and get it out there. If anyone else is interested in helping out, just let me know and we can with you.
I'd love to help.
Yeah.
Hey, Primate, it's Tanya.
Tanya.
My my hand is not working, so I just wanna say that we did have a consultant before with Lisa. Bonnie, I did think that she always gave us great feedback, so maybe we can circle to see if she's interested. And another one that I did like is the consultant that CB1 had during the one LAC process. I did feel like his study about like light, heights, and the three possibilities that the developers would choose was very useful to understand. And I wish we would had that process at our end.
Yeah, really
I
good
can
call.
check for his name, but I don't
Yeah.
have it on top of
Chris,
my
he
head
is
right now.
familiar with him. I think his name is
Yeah.
James, so we can
Yeah,
get with him.
that's right. He's also essentially the person who's done a lot of consulting for community boards. This is his corner. So I think he's definitely someone who would apply to an RFP. But I love, you mentioned another name who apparently has worked with the board in the past. It would be great to encourage that person to apply also.
Very familiar with LFC especially.
Yeah, cool. Lisa, anything you want to add on this? Because I know it seems like you've done this before.
No, I mean, there was a $40,000 allocation from the city council at that point in time, and that's what funded the consultant to do the waterfront study with us, so it's just a question of identifying the funding.
Yeah, that's great. I don't think we'll have that much money to throw around, but I think we have a couple of $1,000s, so we might be able to do some small projects.
But
Cool.
I forgot, I wanted to just give a quick update. I was able to talk to Andrew Spino at EDC, just to give an update on what was going on with their RFEI process on the DOE building. And they said that they gathered all the information. They have yet to really do anything with the information. They are planning on doing an RFP by 2028. And they're also kind of waiting right now for their commissioner to be assigned in order to keep going forward. So I had just put forth, because originally what they had told us further back in the process was that the responses from that RFEI was meant to inform a potential RFP or ideas on how to plan the entire site, in which I was suggesting that maybe there should be somehow an additional community input process somewhere somehow that specifically talks to the rest of the site outside of the DOE building. So they're taking that info back, and I also said I would bring it back to community board in case that there is a way that our board can be a mechanism to collect input on the different ways that we as a community are envisioning the entire site outside of the DOE building use, so that we don't go so far along the process that by the time EDC releases an RFP, we no longer have input on what those requirements or parameters are that they determined and how they went about doing that. So she'll hopefully get back to me once they have a commissioner and when they have more info, but she said it was noted.
Yeah, that's
So it's
helpful.
something we can talk about too, because that is our last piece of lowest hanging fruit land, and it would, yeah, we need to have a very clear say on how that land is.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I'm gonna assign this action item back to Pegula, because I think this is probably part of those monthly updates that we would want on the DOE building RFP. I think this is surrounding site.
And Andy's been super responsive.
Yeah, and we touch base with EDC regularly, so when there is an update.
Yeah.
From Angie or from anyone else on the DOE building, I can bring that.
Perfect.
It's unlikely though that every single month there will be an update.
Yes, yeah, the update is no update, that's
Yeah,
fine,
okay,
but
great.
yeah.
As long as they know we keep asking. We have not forgotten.
Cool. The last thing I had on my agenda was, we have identified a vice chair for this committee. It's gonna be Tanya. Tanya, thank you so much for stepping up. You're gonna be wonderful. And I
Tiny's still
appreciate,
sharing engagement?
what was that?
Tiny's still sharing engagement?
We're figuring out a
Okay.
plan for that committee. But Tanya is gonna be vice chair of this committee officially starting next.
Thank you, Primate, and thank you for your trust.
For sure. Excited to be working with you.
Oh, Lisa has a hand up.
Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the HPD point person for parcel D and E, I guess, left. He left that department, so I don't know who the point person is there now, but it might be worthwhile to identify who the HPD contact is there.
Sorry, Lisa, who was your contact that left?
Oh, what's his name? I'll tell you in a second, but I'll put it in the chat. I forget his name, but I'll tell you in a minute. I'm gonna,
Cool. All right, anything else that others want to talk about before we break? All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Thanks for having parks.